Welcome to Challah 101 from our house in Bel Air. So Danny asked if Sarah Ellis and I would do a tutorial on Challah, and we are spending our Monday afternoon doing exactly that. So the setup we have here is just for you to kind of see what each stage looks like. And I've already sent a list of ingredients to Danny to forward to everyone, so you'll know what you need.
We've gone ahead and done the first couple steps because the yeast takes a little while to rise.
So to begin with, in this recipe, the first thing you need to do is take a tablespoon and 3/4 teaspoons active dry yeast and 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar, and to that, in the bowl of your mixer, you add 1 3/4 cups lukewarm water, which I take straight from the hot water in my sink. And I stir that together, and you give it 5 minutes, and this is what it should look like. The sugar activates the yeast while it proofs, and it gets kind of foamy like this. So, if you don't start with the right thing to begin with, you're going to have problems throughout the whole process. So you want to get this yeast nice and happy before you start the next process. So once your yeast has proofed for about 5 minutes, then you start the next stage, all in your mixer. And you'll see, guys, my mixer is not the small standard size mixer. This is a slightly oversized mixer. You can make it in the smaller mixer,
but it takes a toll on it.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it splatters stuff around, and we bought this mixer specifically because the Challah called for it.
If you do make it with a smaller mixture, the dough will start to rise up on top of this and get into here, so you'll have to push it down every once in a while.
But it can be done, but I'm just saying it's easier if you have a big mixer. Okay, that being said, now that we've got the yeast ready to go, the first thing that we do is we add 1/2 cup of oil into the yeast. And we use vegetable oil. I've tried it with canola oil, and what I found was that it made my challah crumbly. So I would stick with plain old vegetable oil. And once we get that in, we incorporate that with the standard mixer paddle. And just stir that in. And the next process is to add the eggs. Now, my recipe says add them one at a time. I actually break them into a bowl and slightly beat them a little bit before I put them in rather. And then I just dump the whole thing in. And I let it go for just a few minutes. And then the next part is to add sugar. You've got 1/2 cup more sugar. So my sugar goes in.
You want to make sure to add the salt last because the salt kills the yeast. And if you do it before, it won't let the foam come up.
Alright, so now that you've got your sugar and your salt and your oil and your eggs, the next part is about the flour. Now, in the original recipe that I got, this recipe came from the website Smitten Kitchen. She used all-purpose flour for all of it, but as I've made it over the years, I use half all-purpose and half bread flour. And I start with the bread flour, and I put 4 cups of bread flour in, and I take it unsifted right out of the bag. This is
Bread flour.
Yep.
We usually put in the bread flour first.
Yep, I always put in the bread flour first.
Is there a reason?
I don't know. We just have always done it that way. And I continue to just work it in 2 cups at a time.
Again, if you're using that smaller mixer, at this point, it might start to splatter all over the place. So you've been warned.
And it looks kind of lumpy at this point, which is fine.
Don't worry about it.
right, so then I put the next 2 cups in. And then I took the 2 more cups in. And again, I have odd-shaped cups and odd-shaped measuring spoons. This 2 cup is super convenient because it's the quantity with which I add it in. All right, so now when I get to 6 cups in there, it'll start getting a little bit thicker. All right, so now we've got 6 cups and we're going for the last 4 cups, 2 cups. And at this point, I don't put it all in at the same time because for one thing, depending on the size of your eggs, and the recipe calls for large eggs, but you've all probably seen sometimes a large egg is super large and sometimes it's rather small. The amount of flour is approximate.
If it's too sticky, you add more flour.
And I usually go more than the 8 cups. All right, so at this point you'll see that it's kind of coming together as a dough. And again, I've got this extra large mixer, which makes it easier.
A lot easier.
Right, now at this point, I've probably got 7 cups of flour in there. I'm gonna take this out and switch to a bread hook.
Which usually looks something like this, but ours looks like this.
Okay, and this is the part where you end up getting a little bit on your hands, but that's okay too. Baking can be messy. Okay. Can you hand me that scrape that I asked you to?
Yep. There you go.
Actually, the spoon will be better though. The one that scrapes down the side. It's the hard one in there. This one, honey.
As you can tell, we're kind of new to making this type of thing, so it might not be perfect. We're not new at making challah, so
We ended up making a video about it. Last year we made, Sarah Ellis made, what, it was 2 years ago almost now, maybe about 1.5 years. She made over 100 loaves of challah to give to the Humane Societies for Bat Mitzvah Project. So that was the opportunity to get lots of practice on this process. All right, so now we put the bread hook in.
And while we do this, I like to put stuff away as we're done with the ingredients, but I'm not going to put away the all-purpose flour yet.
We may need more.
We need it later.
We may need more now even.
Oh, never mind.
All right, so let's see what we got. We keep working in the rest of the 8 cups. You can see it continues to come together.
This is about the point where I like to taste it.
All right, now we've got all 8 cups of flour in there now. At this point, you just let the mixer do the work. If you were working with a smaller mixer, you may at this point have to take it out and knead it by hand.
Or pay a lot more attention, because like I said, it could jam the
mechanics.
It took a toll on our own cook. It makes weird noises now when it mixes.
All right, so we're gonna see what we have here. I'm gonna push this back off. And the texture that you're going for is described as
Like a baby's butt.
the feel of a baby's butt. And actually, that is an accurate feel. All right, so I think this looks about right. So at this point, I will take it out.
She's said it so many times you can just feel when it feels right.
Well, it just looks right. All right, so we'll take this out.
This is about what it should look like.
Okay, and now we're going to take it and finish working it into a ball on our countertop. And while we're doing that, Sarah is going to rinse the bowl, and we're going to grease it with a little bit of the remaining, or with extra vegetable oil that she'll just use a paper towel and wipe down the sides. And that's so that as the dough rises, it won't stick to the side of the metal bowl, and it will actually continue to climb during the rise process. And I will tell you that one of the things I do here in Florida, because my house is air conditioned, and it stays pretty much the same temperature all year round, but I keep my kitchen about 74 degrees. I will heat my oven at the lowest possible setting for about 4 minutes to create a warm, draft-free environment. And I do let my bread dough rise in the oven, and I think they call that, force rising, but it just gives me a constant in terms of the rise and the time. So that's another tip that I'll offer. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put some flour on your cabinet, or on your countertop.
Not cabinet.
We put it on our cabinet too, sadly.
Not on purpose.
Yes. All right. And so I'm going to kind of.
We have a tool kind of like this that we use to scrape the bottom.
You have to get it out of there, and you'll see. There you go. Okay.
Ta-da!
It looks kind of like this, and then I hand knead it, and you'll see that it does have this kind of firm, smooth texture to it. You don't want it too wet. This actually looks perfect. And the one thing I'll say, or another thing I'll say about the bread when you do it, is that, my directions will say let things rise for an hour, but things vary in Florida because our humidity levels really make things rise more quickly. And a lot of times when you see pictures of the bread, where it looks like the definition of the braids, everything's kind of mushed together, it's because the bread's been allowed to rise for too long. And it tastes great. It has this fluffier texture. But in my house, we judge the challah. Everybody likes it to have a little bit of pull and a little bit of chew. But anyway, when we finished, and it looks just like this, and it sounds like this, then you just plop it into a bowl that's been greased, and Sarah Ellis is going to hand me back the one.
I'm working on it.
Actually, we'll use another one. It'll be faster.
That's probably true. Oil up.
Use another bowl. And we'll take some of the remaining vegetable oil that you put away.
Oops, I was too quick to put things away.
All right.
And you just pour a little in here. And you take a paper towel. Oop, that might have been a little bit too much. And then I might have to wipe some of that out. But you wipe it around with the paper towel. Like this, and it sounds kind of gross. But, ta-da. And then you throw this over, because you don't need it anymore.
All right. Here we go. I'm going to plop it in there. I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap.
And then we're going to let it sit for an hour. Into the oven.
Now Now it goes into my oven that has been slightly warm.
And then, once we've done this, we'll see you in an hour. This is 1 hour later. And the saran wrap should have been pressed up like this. Then you take it off. And to get to punch it down, this is the fun part.
You can see how it's doubled in size, or close to it. You know, if you don't have that much rise, let it rise longer.
That's about
And
right.
this is actually, we took this out a little bit less than an hour because it had, you know,
It had been
really
done.
blossomed. Okay, so now we're going to cover it back up.
But first I'm going to take a piece to eat.
We're going to put it back in. And the original recipe said to let it rise for another hour. But my experience in this humidity in Florida is that it'll poof right back up within about 30 minutes. So we're going to check it at 30 minutes and see where we are.
All right. See you later. This is 30 minutes later.
All right, and for us today, 30 minutes was enough for it to come right back where it
When
was.
we punched it.
Okay, so now it's time to shape the dough, and we're going to do 2 different varieties today. We're going to do traditional 6th grade, and we're going to do the holiday round one, which actually we think is the easiest of them. So we'll start maybe by doing the round one and show you what that looks like.
We're just showing you this so that you can know both ways. So first you sprinkle some flour on the counter so that it doesn't stick too much.
Right, and then
Is
you
that enough?
pull the dough out. We need to add more, we will. Just plop it on the counter.
You don't want to add too much because you don't want to make it not sticky anymore.
Right.
You don't want to add too much flour so that it's...
Right, it's nice on a granite countertop. It gives you a little pull to roll it out. And if you get too much flour on there, you can't really roll it. We'll see. Okay, so first we're just going to cut it in half. And we'll put the other back in the bowl and let it sit and work with the first piece. And we have a extra large cookie sheet, which we've lined with parchment. And I've done this 3 loaves, and I've done, this goes into 4 balls, so just cut in half and half again. I've done it in, if you do 2, you have 2 really nice size loaves. If you do 3, which we've done 2, they're also nice size, but the baking time varies depending on.
So if you want to see if they're the same size, you just kind of ball them up to see if they're even.
Right?
Those look pretty even to me.
And then we start rolling it out, and there may be some air pockets in it, so you may want to, hit those. And as you see, we really don't have a lot of flour on the counter, because I find if you flour too much on the counter, at this point, it really makes it hard to roll it out.
See, there's a little air pocket in mine.
All right. And I don't think you'll want it that long for the 4-piece. We haven't done the 4-piece in a while, but you really don't want that long. Okay, maybe we'll shrink back up a little bit. You'll see these directions on our, now once you get them rolled out, that's when I start adding a little flour so they don't stick.
Okay.
All right, so now we've got 4 that are about the same size.
And you kind of weave them in to start.
So you're just gonna, from the beginning, do a crisscross.
So you do over,
That's
under.
really thin, that one. You might wanna
I might.
weave over that.
Okay, I will. Oops. See, it happens to everyone.
So I kind of like to stretch a little bit. And at this point, these pieces I will dust with flour a little bit so that they're easier to work with. Hold on one second. All right.
You kind of weave it in like a basket. So if this one's, if it's over, you do it under for the other one.
Let's get this in a little bit longer still. All right.
Okay.
Now,
So I got.
so I put a little bit of flour on that piece.
You do.
So you go.
I'd like it a little bit tighter in the middle. So you go, the one that's under, you take it over the one, so like this.
Over. So in this case, she's going counterclockwise, and when you've gone all 4 counterclockwise, then you go back
Then you go
the other direction.
Other way. I got it, Mom. And then you go the other way.
You can kind of just squeeze them together at that point, because you're going to tuck them under.
And then you kind of pinch it together and you tuck it under. See, I would have rolled it out a little bit thinner.
That's beautiful. And you just plop it onto your
cookie tray, which is right here.
All right.
Okay.
That's round. Next.
Bit of a clatter there.
6-piece.
Do it in half. And then you kind of roll it out a little so that you can separate it into 3.
Now, if you're doing 3 loaves, I find that the 6-piece braid
I'm really bad at separating them into
is a
even
little
pieces.
much for the smaller loaf, and then I do a 4-piece braid, and you'll
That
see the
one's a little
directions are in that.
Do these look even?
That one still feels kind of big. Let's see.
This one feels a little. This one looks a little small. See, it's good to have a team member to.
And
to help
especially
you.
when you're braiding the 6 one, because if you forget midway what you're doing, and it happens,
Oh, I've done it.
right, you can't stop. If you stop in the middle, you're lost. So you just have to get your rhythm and go. So make sure you're not distracted when you're braiding.
I like to do it thinner than she does.
Tell me how you want it. And I'll roll it.
Like that.
Okay.
This is too thick for my taste. We don't expect you to get it right the first time, but either way, if you do it right, it'll taste good.
That's true. And I think, like you saw Sarah Ellis tighten that braid, a nice tight braid, I think makes a big difference.
Right, one more.
Now, if you're like us, you have a dog at your feet behind you, as I just keep mine out of the way. Gently, I should say, nudge the old boy.
It's not that old.
He's 6. All right. And I put some flour on them, because if you don't, at this point, it makes them kind of hard to work with. It can get sticky.
So I like to pinch them, press them down with my thumb at the top. I don't know if you can see that.
And then, once she braids them, you'll see before we tuck them under, sometimes I cut those ends off to make it pretty. Okay.
Wait, let me just check and see if you can see. You can see. Hip hip hooray.
Okay, so there are 4 central pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. The whole key is that you're going to work from one side and center into the middle, and you'll see us do it. So you start with this, whichever side you want to go. Second piece
one,
all the way over. And then the first one from the
one's
same.
in the middle of the 4 pieces.
All right, and then you go from the other side. Second one
Second
all
one
the way
over.
over. And the first one
in the middle.
And then second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle. Second one.
No, it's
First one in the middle.
first one
In the middle.
Second
One
one
all the way
over.
over.
First
one in the middle. Second one. That's the first one. Oh yeah. Second one all the way over. First one in the middle.
And so
Second one all the way over. First one in the middle.
When they're kind of stumpy, you give up.
So now here is where I take this piece and I kind of chop it off at the end here, because
Then
that's
you can
not so
fold it
pretty.
under.
Okay, and I just chop it and squeeze it, and then we'll fold it under when we put it on the thing. And the same thing down here. I'll kind of chop off that end because it's not so pretty either. And then we'll roll it under a little bit.
And then we'll plop it on the tray.
All right. Ready?
This might not be my prettiest work.
I actually think that looks pretty good. There you go. All right, now you have a nice tight little braid. Okay, now at this point,
there you go. This is what it looks like.
Okay.
Oop, caught some dough.
All right, now at this point, you have a beaten egg.
So you need more than 4 eggs that we showed you in the beginning.
Right, this is your fifth one here. And again, make sure if you got any pieces poking out that you get them tucked under now, because you can't really manipulate them once they start to rise. They will stick to that paper.
Okay.
Okay, so now you brush them everywhere.
Brush them with egg.
At this point, we're going to let them rise for another 30 minutes. Now, this to me is the tricky point. People like to see the bread rise to the size that the loaf's going to be, but the longer you let it rise, the less the definition becomes in this braid, and it'll bleed
all the work that we just
coils
did
of the braid will kind of
go away.
You'll lose the definition.
So you don't want to go too far on this part.
That's right. You let them rise for about 30 minutes, and now on my counter, I let these rise on the counter, and lucky for us, underneath this counter I have an ice machine, and it puts a little bit of warmth into the slab, and it kind of helps, I think, with that rise.
When you're washing it with egg, you want to make sure that you get all of it, because if you don't, it won't be shiny.
You get a dull spot on your loaf.
It happens, but if you can avoid it, you should.
Now you'll also see on the recipe that I sent to Danny, if you were going to put mix-ins like raisins and stuff, you would have mixed them in after the second rise prior to the braiding.
I gotta tell you, as a person who's braided them with the raisins in it, it makes it a little bit more challenging because the raisins like to pop out when you're rolling them.
That's true. But we put a cinnamon butter
sugar
inside, and that's yummy. And then I've the same person that I got the original recipe from the Smitten Kitchen. She has a orange fig stuffing, which is fantastic.
I did like that one.
Which we've done, and we've done it. Did we do a chocolate one once?
No, I don't think we did.
I think we had. But I also, if you wanted to...
we saw this one recipe that had marzipan in it.
Oh, that looked good.
It did look good. We haven't tried that yet.
We had marzipan, by the way. I remember that.
We could, but
yes.
we don't need to do that today.
And then the other thing you can do is, and we'll wait until after the second braid, but if you wanted to put poppy seeds on it, you would do it after the second braid, after you brushed on the egg, before it goes in the oven. And I've also put sea salt on for the same reason. It adds a nice finish. All right, so now we will be back in 30 minutes, right before we go in the oven.
Okay, see ya.
Okay, this is put approximately 30 minutes later. On the recipe that I sent you, directions say to let it rise for an hour on the second rise. If you can see, this is 25 minutes, and they've already started to kind of spread out. I don't want them to rise any more than this. First of all, sometimes if you do, the braids will bust open, and secondly, they'll just lose their definition.
You just need to pay attention just in case.
Right, so you're not looking for them to double in size between the braiding and the bake.
You just have to make sure that they're bigger. They don't have to be much bigger, but they...
Well, in this case, I think they got probably 25-30% bigger.
Yeah, that's about right, because every minute. That's probably not how it works, but...
Anyway.
It just depends on the temperature outside.
And we also cut the paper to spread them a little bit and give them a little distance.
Yeah, because they were getting too close together.
Which will give you a pretty good indication of how much they had grown, because this one, when we first did it, was probably that far away, and when I cut the paper...
They'll be able to tell because it'll be right next to the video.
Right.
So.
Alright. So now we're going to...
Oh, it's Harper in the background.
Yep, and we're going to finish brushing these and cover all the spots. And then they'll go in the oven. I've got a 300...
You have to make sure to preheat the oven while it's rising.
And I've got a 375 degree oven on convection bake. It's okay if you don't have convection. And actually, I think for convection, we want to do it at 350. So we'll back that down to 350 for convection. And then sometimes during the bake, I'll alternate. I usually set the timer for like 15 minutes, then I turn the bread so it cooks all the way around. Sometimes I'll turn it over to conventional oven.
It does depend on
so that it won't get so dark. I find that in convection it actually gets darker. And then we'll pull it out and let you see how it did. And my rack is in the middle of the oven, so.
You don't want to overcook the bottom or the top.
Nope. And we will be back in about 25 minutes. And again, at about 23 minutes, I stick my meat thermometer in there. It's not a meat thermometer, it's an instant read thermometer. I'll show you what I use. I have this. And I stick it into the loaf. The loaf of bread is ready when it gets to 190 degrees. So, you know, start checking it. And I find, like, if you've got it, it's 175 degrees, just check it every 2 or 3 minutes and see where you are.
And also, if your oven is more intense, just maybe check it a little earlier to make sure.
All right, so we're gonna put it in the oven and we'll be back 25 minutes.
Okay, see you then.
All right, here we have the finished product. Just one last tip is that the longer braided one does not require as much time as this thick one. So I had to cook this in about 4 extra minutes, but if you thump them, they have that kind of nice hollow sound to them, and they're ready to go. In my house, they don't last very long, but you can wrap them in plastic wrap and then in foil and keep them for about 3 months in your freezer. And then when you're ready to thaw them out, you can just pull them out the morning that you want to use them. And then you can also wrap them in foil and put them in an oven at around 350 degrees for about 10 minutes to kind of give them a more freshened taste on the day you want to serve them.
You can also slice them up and make French toast out of them. It's pretty tasty. You can also make strata out of the leftover cubes of it if you have like an end left. So
my girls like to eat the middle out, and then I have all this crust left, or not that much crust, but I'll just take that and put it in a Ziploc bag in my freezer, and when I get enough of them, I'll cube them up and make a strata, or you could make a bread pudding. So anyway, that's Challah 101 from the Morgan household.
We've given you our secret recipe, so
enjoy.
Yep. This is about 10 minutes later. Ooh, this looks tasty.
Yep. Happy to.
Best with some room temperature butter.
Turn off.
Yeah.
You want butter on it?
It's a little bit fluffier. Too long.
Yeah.